Hello, and welcome to the Indie Dev Podcast. I'm David Voiles, and with me today is Kevin Giguère, a programmer in his 30s from Quebec, Canada, and the man behind Dragon Slumber, an isometric RPG created with XNA. Previously, Kevin worked on a JRPG, Arelite Core, which went through Steam Greenlight. Originally started as a dream project to create his own game from scratch, Kevin has done everything himself. Kevin, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So it's interesting. I've had two developers on back-to-back who were both working on XNA. So the framework that I thought was long gone and abandoned seems to definitely still have some legs behind it, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty good tool. It's really a shame that Microsoft decided to discontinue it back in 2012. But yeah, I've really enjoyed using it in general.
Mm-hmm. It's like C# gaming kind of came out of nowhere, and then Unity took it over when XNA started to go by the wayside.
Yeah, well, Unity has such an amazing array of tools to make games, whereas XNA was really, you have to build a lot of stuff from the ground up. So I'm not really surprised that Unity took off the way it did, but really I think XNA really had. There's a reason why I decided to use XNA for the project. Yep. It just had a level of flexibility which I loved, which was really useful for to build a game, especially a 2D game, because back when I started in 2012, there weren't a lot of good. I didn't feel like there were good 2D tools to make the games. Like Unity was great for 3D, but for 2D it was a whole other matter.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so now this isn't your first game with XNA, right? You have plenty of experience with this before. Like I mentioned in the intro, Arelite Core was one of your previous titles.
No, this is actually my first project with XNA. Arelite Core is my first project with XNA actually. And I learned XNA specifically for Arelite Core. Mm-hmm. So the development started around 2012, as I mentioned, on the project. And just to give a bit of context for the listeners, Arelite Core is a 2D JRPG. So it's something I built the engine from the ground up. So I didn't want to use RPG Maker, for instance, which was already a very popular tool back then. But I felt like RPG Maker might hinder design opportunities, which is why I really wanted something that was just more flexible and something which I could really take more advantage of as I made my game. Yeah. So that's why I decided to go with XNA back in the day, and I built. I learned the tools. I learned. I was already a programmer back then, but I did have to learn C#. Right. Which again, very easy to learn language when you've learned stuff like JavaScript and just the .NET in general. And yeah, I learned to code for XNA from the ground up. I made a small demo, which eventually led to the creation of and development of Arelite Core.
Yep. Oh, nice. Yeah. So did you have experience programming before you started working with XNA? Like, was your full-time job working as a programmer or developer of some sort?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, I'm in my 30s now. I went through computer a computer science course in college, and afterwards I was hired as a web developer. I've been a web programmer for most of my life.
Oh, nice.
And it's really more about I've done more web programming specifically. Like I've made a website to manage online learning. So it's very it's a lot of database management, and it's a lot of data management. Basically, it's not just interfaces and CSS and all of that.
Yeah.
So I had done a lot of programming up to that point.
Yep.
And I even worked with a company for a few years which made Flash games.
Okay.
So they were basically a contractual firm which was hired by companies like Disney and big companies like that to basically create promotional games for movies which were coming out or TV shows. So I already had a lot of experience in programming up to that point, and I had some gaming development experience up to that point.
Okay.
But yeah, Arelite Core is definitely on a whole other level, because on other projects I was the programmer on those projects. On Arelite Core, I do the programming, but I also do the business side, and I do the design, and I do management of people. So yeah, it's definitely a much larger endeavor than I've had up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes off as a project. The art is incredible in this, and like looking at the Arelite Core credits, there are quite a few people involved in this project too, like tile artists, sprite artists, background artists.
Yeah, that's been definitely a long time coming. I had to hire a lot because I can't do art. I'm a programmer at heart, and I'm a designer, but I can't do any art. So I had to hire contractual artists to work on the various elements of the game. And yeah, that was definitely a difficult aspect of just making the game, and it's an aspect that I think, as people looking into the indie scene, they might not realize how difficult it is to just to have to hire people and have to manage people, and just get the right people, but also because I'm indie and because I'm self-funded, I can't afford to go for a big, well-known company to have produced my assets. So I have to do the legwork and find smaller, not as well-known artists, but who can do great work and who can produce high quality assets like that. That's definitely the I think one of the most difficult parts, finding the right people for the project at a price that I can afford, basically.
So in terms of hiring staff and managing staff, like what are some of the more important lessons you've learned along the way there? Like looking back now, is there something you wish you would have been able to tell yourself, 3 or 4 years in advance?
Oh, definitely. If someone doesn't work, cut them loose. And it's such a rough thing to say. Yeah. But if you have the wrong people on the team, they can tank your project.
Absolutely.
And it's tough to find the right people. So when you do happen on people, and some artists are actually great at producing art, but they're great in their specific context. And sometimes I needed someone who could work outside of that context, and I thought that someone could do the job, and it didn't work out. And it's fine to say, hey, things aren't working out. We're gonna have to, I have to find someone else to do the right job. But at the same time, it's such a struggle to find the right people that it's easy to say, well, I'll just give him another chance and maybe things will work out.
Right, you kind of settle and hope for the best.
Yeah, exactly. And
that doesn't benefit anybody.
Sometimes it works out, but you just have to accept that sometimes it's not going to work out and to just move along. Because at the end of the day, we're all working towards making the best game we can, and it doesn't serve the game to have the wrong types of people in those positions.
Yeah, exactly. There's a very good podcast I listened to. It's called Startup, and it's by a group of people who had previously left NPR, so it's National Public Radio, and they were making wildly popular podcasts. So the whole first season of this podcast is all about how they're starting their own podcast hosting company, essentially. And most recently, they're about to start their third season, they went back and looked at some of their statistics and things. And one of the things they noticed was that they hadn't fired anybody in the year or so that they've been around. So they've hired about 25 people total, and they've had zero people fired or removed. 3 of them had left on their own regard, to start up other companies or do whatever. But they had brought this up to VCs, venture capitalists, and VCs said that actually this is really odd because startups or companies at the beginning generally have a lot of turnover and a lot of churn. And that's actually not a bad thing because it's about, like you mentioned earlier, trying to piece in the correct people in the correct roles. And if you're not adding and removing people, you're often just being complacent, right? So your chances of knocking out of the park the first time and hiring all of the perfect staff for that role is a little bit different, a little more difficult, right? So sometimes it is best to have to remove some people or find the best fit for that role, and you seem to have done a good job of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important also to mention that sometimes the problem isn't that the artist or the person that's being removed isn't good. Sometimes the person can be a great artist. It's just not the right person for that specific job. Mm-hmm. So it can be tough, and it's important to, I think, not take things personal when those things happen, because it's not always a matter of skill, basically.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It's about finding the right people for the right job.
Exactly.
So we talked about Arelite. So where is that now? It's already out? Yes? No?
The game isn't out right now. I'm aiming for a fall 2016, so fall this year release. I'm still chipping away at it every day. Still producing a lot of visual assets. Development is really interesting because I feel like each year I double the amount of produced assets of the previous year. Yep. So in the first year, you're still trying to understand what the project is, and you try to figure out the right people for the job. So work advances really slowly. And then as each subsequent year of development happens, you make even more stuff because you polish your work procedure and you really understand what the project needs, and you get the right people in the right positions. Yeah. So as I'm moving forward through the years, each year is better than the previous one. It's everything is moving so much faster, and the quality of the work being done is so much greater. So yeah, right now I'm at about 60%, 65% of the game being completed, and I'm aiming for release in fall of this year.
Building on top of that, so it looks like you've spent some time making this entire game. Do you have any difficulty with managing 2 projects at once? Like, because it looks like Dragon Slumber and Arelite Core, are they being built at the same time? Or
well, Dragon Slumber is the name of the company, actually.
Oh, okay, that explains my confusion then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I assumed you're working on 2 projects at once.
I'm only working on Arelite Core. However, it is true that at the same time I am building a business, building
Yeah.
Dragon Slumber. And there's definitely a lot of work going into that, which I didn't account for when I started the project. We don't tend to think of things like having to do taxes and having to do all of the management things associated with running a business. And
that's like a full-time job in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't incorporate Dragon Slumber. It's actually a registered company to myself, which means that there are some the company isn't separate from me. Basically, it's
right.
more like a private. I'm basically like a contractor in the eyes of the law. So there are some simplifications that I have in that sense, but on the other hand, it's still a lot more management, and it's a lot of promotional work and a lot of business business planning.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned promotions, and that is a common issue that I see a lot of novice developers run into, and particularly around students that I'm working with at universities, in that they'll often reach out to me and say, "Hey, my game is done. Now how do I reach out to journalists and YouTube streamers?" And I'll say, whoa, you are waiting entirely too late. You've got to do this months in advance, right? And they'll say, "Oh, well, I just want to make a game. I don't want to worry about marketing and PR." And as you realize, right, that's a very large part of game development, right? Even look at something like as big as Star Wars, right? Star Wars, massive, the most successful movie of all time at this point. But they had marketing campaigns for years building up to that. So what are your thoughts on marketing and more than just programming when it comes to game development?
Oh, it's without a doubt one of the biggest struggles I've had, especially because it's another situation where I am alone in making the game, and it's tough because you want to be working on making the game, but at the same time, once the game is out, you want it to be successful. So you have to, like you said, you have to lay down all of the groundwork. In my case, I started easily a year, 2 years in advance. Just setting up a website, making trailers, managing a Twitter account, a Facebook account, and keeping very active on those, sending out press releases to the press, and those take time. It takes time, especially when you haven't done any of that before, so you have to learn the process, and you everything you do reflects on your project, even if it's not directly game design or programming. Everything you choose to do reflects on your project. So you want to give the best first impression to the press. You want to put out the best trailers, the best videos, and quality takes time.
Absolutely.
It takes time away from development, but it's what's required. So
you need like the whole well-rounded package and not just a game.
Yeah, exactly. And really that's what it comes down to when you're an indie developer. You have to, as a person, be a well-rounded package and be able to say, okay, I can do this, but I can also do these 5 other things that the project requires. I might not want to do that all the time. Right. I want to work on the game. But if it's what's required, you just have to settle down and do the work. Do all of that work. In my case, I'm kind of lucky because even though I'm not an artist, I can go into Photoshop and just do a few of the work that needs to be done. Even though I'm not a composer, I can go in Audacity and do a bit of just giving examples for the composer to show what I'm looking for, and that's the kind of work that's I think is really required as an indie dev. Just be able to do everything at least really well, not to say excellently.
Yeah, right, exactly. You've got to wear many hats at once, right? Because if you're not going to manage the project, you've got to hire someone who will do that for you.
Yeah, and hiring people costs money, and hiring great people costs a great amount of money, so you don't always have the budget for to do those things.
Yeah, and it's frequently the chicken and egg issue that independent developers run into, where they say, I want to make a game, but I need money to hire people, and I can't hire people without getting money. So how do I get this, right?
Exactly. That's a great point. And also on that matter, I think Kickstarter is a really interesting not
medium.
Experiment, but it's an interesting situation, because I think I personally didn't use Kickstarter. Just for reference, I invested my own money into the project, but I do look a lot at the platform, and I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people look at Kickstarter and think, okay, well, I can get this amount of money and this will get me this far, basically.
Right.
But I think Kickstarter is a bit of a dream for a lot of devs, because I don't think they really expect all of the expenses that are required to make a great game. And there's a reason why a lot of Kickstarters are struggling right now, because it's a lot of new developers who don't have necessarily the experience required to understand what's needed to bring a project to its proper conclusion.
Yep. Yeah, and I really stopped backing a lot of games on Kickstarter, largely because I saw how few were actually ever getting published. And from even having friends and interviewed different people who've gone through the Kickstarter process, regardless of how much you listen to on podcasts and read up on it, it quickly becomes another job in and of itself, particularly that month that you are kickstarting, right? You should not be doing development. You should be marketing and promoting this as much as possible to get money to continue development. But even so, with all the money you acquire, there's still a disconnect between what people contribute and what you actually receive, right? So you may ask for $100,000, but Kickstarter takes their money off the top. Uncle Sam, at least the American government, will definitely get their nice tax percentage of that. And then you also have to pay for these items that you're frequently shipping out, right? Physical assets or goods for backers. You have to allocate and afford the time that you're spending to do this. So before you know it, you may have asked for $100,000, but in reality, you're left with $50,000, if not less. And that's in addition to the time that you spent creating the campaign, marketing everything and everything afterwards. So Kickstarter, I think, is a great way to help build interest around a product. It's largely a promotional tool which can also generate some revenue, but I'm not confident that it can help fund entire projects. For some people, they've seen success, but I think overall it's still the jury is kind of still out on this one. And I say this as someone who's backed several projects only to see a handful of them ever actually get released.
Oh, sure. And I have backed a few projects as well, and have seen, some success and some failures. Most of them, it's really rare that a Kickstarter will deliver its product on time. And that does translate to more costs. So already there, you can assume that the devs have more costs beyond the amount that was kickstarted.
Yeah.
Just to take one of the great Kickstarter successes, in my opinion, Shovel Knight, which was made by a team of, I believe, well-versed people of the industry. These weren't novices, and they raised a lot of money, but they still had to go through quite a struggle to get the game out. And it's a fantastic game. Shovel Knight is one of the best games that's come out in the last few years.
Absolutely. I played through it on 2 consoles.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I imagine that it was nightmarish for the devs, not only during the Kickstarter, but also leading up to the release, since it's a great game, which means that it had a lot of struggles and a lot of trial and error, and probably, I'm sure, a lot of delays leading up to it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Probably a lot of personal investments from the team members going into the project beyond the Kickstarter funds.
Yep, absolutely. So let me ask you, what are your future plans for this? We know that you're obviously targeting Steam. Are you also considering consoles or mobile development?
So right now, I'm really focusing on the Steam release. I know you're a huge fan of XNA, but I have to say one of the problems that I do have with
limitations.
XNA, well, it's the specific limitations for platforms. So for Mac especially, I talked to a lot of people, and Mac is an important platform at this point, which XNA. I don't know how well it can perform on.
Yeah, perhaps through Monogame.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've heard about Monogame and I've heard about FNA, which were both the same at some point, but branched out during development. And I'm looking towards those languages for to update Arelite Core before the release to make it available on more platforms.
Yeah. Yes, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the near future with either tool. Again, one of the limitations of using a framework, but at the same time, with the rise of popular middleware like Unreal Engine and Unity, there's a lot of engineering going on under the hood. Largely because they can recompile for different platforms, and that's a huge help for so many developers because, as you know, you just want to make a game, right? Not everyone wants to make all these crazy tools to keep it going. So that's where middleware, I think, gets very, very popular for developers.
Absolutely, and I would say that after working so long on Arelite Core and working on programming the engine, I don't think I want to do that for my next project. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work again to make it, just going through the debugging and making sure that the memory management works well and all of that. It's such a monumental amount of work that I'm definitely looking to Unity or other platforms when it comes to my next game, basically.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like you got quite the plan ahead. So now that we're coming to a wrap up over here, the way I end up every show is I would like to ask you the question that the previous developer I had on this show had asked, and in this case it was Sean Colombo of Blue Line Games, and he's got a question for you. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm listening.
So if you knew then, right, when you're first starting, what you knew now, what would you do differently?
Oh, that's easy. That's super easy.
Okay,
so this leads directly into a terrible anecdote.
Okay.
One of the first things I did when I started looking for people to work on Arelite Core is so I was looking for artists to produce all of the assets for the game, and I had a long list of assets.
Yep.
And one of the first things I did is hire an Indian firm.
Okay.
I looked at a lot of people, and I decided to go with them. I guess I was naive. One could say I was very naive.
Okay.
And I worked with those people. I paid them in advance.
No.
Yeah.
Well, there's one lesson learned right there.
Yeah, and it was a fairly good advance. So yeah, and throughout the subsequent months, I worked with them. I did work with them, but they produced horrible quality assets, which were absolutely not right for the project. And I also discovered that there was a bit of plagiarism going on. So yeah, that was such a struggle.
And they already have all of your money to begin with.
They have some of the money at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were paid all up front rather than breaking up into tiers, right? Like a little bit up front, and then maybe a little bit a third of the way through, and then the final money at the end.
Well, they were broken into tiers, but there was such a large amount of assets to be produced that each tier was a big chunk of my budget.
Yeah.
So
what did you wind up doing with this?
So I looked into legal counseling on this, and it's an Indian company. There's nothing really you can do. The legal system right over there is really difficult, to say the least.
Okay.
So I had to cut my losses, and just that was basically my first year of development, working with an Indian firm, and it really not working out. So that was a terrible decision.
Okay, so I guess like the gist would be careful when working with outside contractors. So look for things like recommendations beforehand, like regardless of who they are or where they're coming from, right?
Well, that, and just I at this point I don't pay advances anymore. You know, I want to see the work being done well. I want to have proof on the table, and if the artist, there are some great artists who will say, "Well, I can't work with you if you don't pay in advance," and I just can't work with them. I can't put myself in that same situation.
Right, you've been burnt once, but you don't want to be burnt again.
Yeah, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah, that adds up over time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's definitely a valuable lesson to learn, especially because a lot of people getting into game development may not necessarily have a business management or business or finance background. So these are definitely valuable skills for people to learn.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, it's important to have contracts with people.
Yeah.
Like, the contract make a really big deal. However, it's also true that once problems emerge, you have to apply that contract, and that takes time and that takes resources. So just having a contract isn't foolproof. You don't, especially when you work with a lot of people overseas. It can be quite a hassle.
Yep. Okay, so now we're coming around full circle. What question do you have for the next developer who will be on the show?
All right. So my question is, as mobile development has become more popular among gamers and developers alike, what impact has the influx of mobile devs had on the console market and PC market, and vice versa?
Very good question. And like you mentioned, like we are definitely seeing a huge shift from companies who are just making games for dedicated platforms, or I should say consoles, and now they're kind of going towards mobile. And most recently, right, we read about Konami, who absolutely dominated the arcade and home console scene in the 80s and even through the mid-90s. And now, as of the last game, Metal Gear Solid 5, they said they disbanded that team in Kojima Productions, and now they're saying, hey, we're going fully towards like casino and mobile games, which is very, very different from from us, generally older gamers who had grown up with a very, very different Konami in mind, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's also a matter of there are so many, everyone's trying to take the advantage of the mobile market and trying to figure out what that audience wants,
right.
But it's also a very different audience from the console market. So sometimes they try to blend the two, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yep, and we know in business it's adapt or die. So that's what I think a lot of these companies are starting to do.
Oh yeah, exactly.
All right, well, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us today. Before we leave, how can other people find you or your work? Like, for example, Twitter handle or website?
All right, so Arelite Core can be found at arelitecore.com.
Can you spell that for us?
Yeah, sure. ARELITECORE.com.
Okay.
My Twitter handle is Dragon_Slumber.
Okay.
And I'm also on Facebook at Dragon Slumber Games.
Perfect.
So that's it. Those are all the best places to find news about the game and my upcoming projects.
Great. And as with all my guests, I would love to have you come back on in the near future. After you've launched Arelite Core, so that we can discuss some more lessons you've learned along the way, so you can hopefully imbue this knowledge onto other developers who are coming behind you.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I really think it's important to just help the community, the community of developers build itself, and just so everyone can make better games in general.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Kevin, for joining us.
All right, thank you.